This week, I'm joined by Scott Belsky, the founder and CEO of Behance, a company that develops awesome products to help creatives like you and I. We'll talk about how he got started and how to make your ideas happen. Stick around. Welcome to episode numero 14. I am your host, Jose Caballero, co-founder and chief creative officer of digital agency The Group. Every week, you ask business, creative, tech, and marketing questions, and myself and our guest experts answer your web design questions. There are 5 ways you guys can reach us. You can reach us on Ustream, ustream.tv/thisweekend. You can also reach us at youtube.com/thisweekend. At any time, please ask me questions on Twitter with the hashtag TWIWebDesign, TWIWebDesign. You can also tweet me directly at Jose Caballero, And please subscribe to iTunes, subscribe to the show on iTunes. And if you like the show, leave a rating, leave your comments, tell us what we can do for you. Joining us today again is Ari Guimon, who embodies the type of creative that our guest works with. The Behance network is actually something that is made exactly for you. And he's worked on diverse projects such as City Search, Disney, Deutsche Bank, UCLA, and a bunch of stuff. And in 2 weeks, we'll be doing Web Design 102 with additional guest experts. Welcome back, Ari.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to start by introducing Scott. This is an exciting show. I'm very honored to have him on. So, Scott believes that breakthroughs across all industries are a result of creative people and teams that are especially productive, their ability to execute. So much so that he has committed his professional life to helping organize creative individuals like us, teams and networks. He's the founder of the Behance network and the CEO, and it's one of the world's leading creative professional platforms across all industries, not just design, but also development and programming, etc. The 99% is also the research arm of Behance and a think tank, and they host an annual conference every year in New York. And also the action method, which is a task management methodology, which I happen to use. And if that is not enough, he's also the author of a best-selling book, Making Ideas Happen, Overcoming the Obstacles Between Vision and Reality. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
So we have you on the phone and we have you on Skype, and it looks great. We talked earlier a bit about what the Behance network is. Can you explain to our viewers the ecosystem that is Behance?
Sure. Well, I would say that I would just start by saying that we are a medium-agnostic company, meaning that defining us as a tech company or a paper company or a conference company, it wouldn't work. We are mission-centric but medium-agnostic. Our mission, singularly, is to help organize and empower creative professionals. So the network, which really just started as another twist on a portfolio, which is, we felt like people's portfolios are really just made up of a series of projects, some of which represent them better than others. Some projects might be relevant to a particular type of potential client more than others. And the dream was if we could just take everyone's projects out of their portfolios and then be able to sort them and search them based on all the criteria around like what tools were used to create them or who they collaborated with or what field it was or who the client was. And that we would actually be able to organize the creative world's work. And we just felt like the creative world is probably one of the most disorganized communities on the planet. And gosh, everyone's got different stuff in different ways on different websites, and how do you sort through it all? And this dream that we have is sort of, we call it creative meritocracy. Somehow, some way, matching up the best talent with the best opportunity. And we feel like in order to do that, we need to have everyone kind of connecting to the same platform so you can sort through all of it. So actually, people can have their portfolios on AIGA, or if you're a student at SVA, you'll soon have a portfolio there. You can have it on LinkedIn. You can have it on Behance. But regardless, all of these places are actually powered by the same technology, and so you can sort through all the work wherever you are.
So I would say it's almost like a central repository, and then my portfolio spreads across, all these different networks, AIGA, LinkedIn. You said SVA is now going to have your powering their portfolios.
Yeah, we're even working soon with Adweek, the big kind of advertising industry behemoth, and so working with creatives in the ad industry as well. And we're actually just launching now, in the next few weeks, we're launching something called ProSite. Just at prosite.com. But what it is it takes out all of the projects from your Behance portfolio and then it allows you to import them into your own personal website on your own domain name. And we've developed some remarkable tools that, without any programming or CSS knowledge, allows someone to create their completely custom website on their own domain that's always in sync with Behance. And that's the key part here, is that in the future, you'll be able to upload a project as soon as you complete it with as many video, audio, imagery, text, whatever you want in it. And then you'll post it, and then it will show up wherever you want it in the world. It will show up on your own personal website, on LinkedIn if you want it there, on AIGA if you want it there. And it's this new era of efficiency and ultimately organization for creative people.
That's awesome. And Ari, even agencies, even for us to update and have a centralized depository for all our case studies is a huge task to manage. I want to take a step back away from Behance and focus on you. Our audience loves to hear how guests got started, and you have a very unique background. You went to Cornell for your undergraduate, and you did your MBA at Harvard. Can you tell me, first of all, what was your undergrad in, and tell me a little bit about how you got started and how Behance came about?
Yeah, sure. Well, as an undergrad, I had a real interest in information design, and actually my thesis senior year was all around redesigning the resume to better emphasize creative potential and to better serve a creative professional. Because I thought that this notion of, first of all, the static portfolio book that's sent around and is immediately outdated, or the resume, which is a black and white Microsoft Word document that somehow, some way is supposed to represent your creative potential, is a joke. And just did not emphasize people's strengths properly, and that was always an interest. Then I went and decided to really understand the corporate world and understand how business should operate. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that any creative individual or team must consider themselves a business in order to sustain and to scale and to make an impact. And I left I left the corporate world to kind of segue into business school, but the real intention was to start Behance. And actually, I almost dropped out of business school about 6 times, and I remember each almost potential dropout very specifically. I stuck with it, but I really was not a good student. I was very focused on Behance. I had met Matthias Correa, who's my co-founder and partner in the business, who is also the chief of design of the company, in 2005. And we really started cranking on this, and we just, the mission of Behance has never been, we never use the words friends, we never use the word creativity or inspiration. It's actually not the purpose. I mean, the purpose is to organize, to execute, and to really mobilize and empower creative professionals to take the reins on their own careers.
I love that, and I think that's interesting. 2 things about what you just said that are for me very important. One, that you've had this idea for a long time, and you stuck through it through even business school. Your thesis in undergrad was about the redesign of the resume, and you just mentioned and talked about partners. Something that Ari, who is starting his practice freelance and now wants to scale it a bit, has. What was the question we talked about this morning?
I mean, I think there are a couple things. I mean, I would love to hear, Scott, if you have any, just any insight and suggestions for somebody who's just starting out, a creative professional who maybe had a full-time job and is out of a full-time job and is starting a company right now. That's one thing. And then something else that I think we were talking about was how do you go beyond being an individual freelancer to scaling and bringing in other talent and
partners
managing.
And other talents, yes, and managing. And you just mentioned that Matthias, your partner you found early on. So you have to get partners. And can those 2 questions, Scott? One, how do you make the transition, or the one question, how do you make the transition from freelance and try to scale a little bit?
Yeah. Well, listen. I mean, I think that. If you have a system where somehow the best talent gets matched with the best opportunity, then what people should really be doing is trying to get their best work out there constantly. And we actually developed the whole Behance platform to kind of make sure that when people put their work out there, that all of their followers see it immediately, that other people that are related to them see it, that it streams through other vertical websites that we run around the web that showcase great work in, say, toy design or typography or web design. And just increasing the surface area of discovery, we call it, is sort of our goal. We're hoping to get as much exposure for people's work as possible. So, sometimes we hear people say, oh, my work isn't good enough, I'm not ready yet. And, that's BS. Like, people have to put their work out there and start getting traction and engagement around it in order to build their career and increase their opportunity stream. The cool thing is that you can post a piece of work up there that is, an illustration that has like a vintage style to it or whatever, and someone somewhere else in the world can be doing a search for projects that have vintage style illustration and come across your work and reach out to you directly. We heard an interesting story the other day about a guy named Bobby who he was working at a big agency, and he had like a freelance sort of portfolio up on Behance, and he just started getting so many inquiries and so much traction that he left his full-time job at the agency, and he actually did freelance full-time. And interestingly, he kept getting these inquiries, and then one of them came from Apple. And he ended up doing a contract assignment at Apple for around 6 months or something like that to create their, redesign their iAd interface, I think is what he was doing. And while he was there, he met somebody. He came across this idea of like a social news aggregator, and they started a company called Flood, F-L-U-D, which you may have heard of. It's this great iPad and iPhone application. It's all about social news and curation of social news. And then so they launched this product, on the Behance network. They put up a project, they co-owned it, and then it got, I think he said, 16 or 17,000 downloads in the first week that he really attributes to using the power of the platform and all these people that were already following his work. And that's the kind of story you like to hear, is someone kind of breaking out of the mold and leveraging this platform for exposure and for opportunity, and it ultimately could change the course of someone's career.
So it's almost collaboration. If we bring up the screen, Ari's screen, we're looking at the network. And one thing to share with you also is a story. That's Flood right there, and so that our viewers can. And let's stay on the Behance network and let's search for designers. Let's say, for an example, I'll share our how we use Behance. And one of our guest next week, Seth Epstein, introduced me to Behance. Not necessarily I knew about Behance, but to working with it very actively 2 years ago. We use designers from Behance, and amazing quality, great interaction, very professional, a huge network of opportunities. And recently we redesigned the MySpace website, and the designer that, a few of the designers that were mission critical to that, we found on Behance, and we've had relationships since. It's an interesting transition you mentioned with the application Flood. But I think what you mentioned about Matthias and about, from a business standpoint, for me at least, Ari, one of the things is actually having a partner. So I know for a fact that I can't do it by myself, and you have to then have the intent to start a company or to start an agent. It's an interesting thing, but the good thing is that the 21st century we have a lot of options for hybrid practices that don't have to be the traditional agency.
I think that's a really good point, and that came up last week when we were talking to Scott Baggett, how he was saying he has like 3 other, I think.
Yeah, it's 4 guys.
And each one of them specializes in something, and they always come together and just kind of reach a consensus as to what they're putting out there.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I think this is actually something that for Scott, as not as a question, but as an idea or as a inquiry, you mentioned meritocracy and this idea that equality or the ability to for creatives to have access to all these opportunities is extremely important.
Yeah.
Part of that.
And by the way, I would say it's definitely not equality, though, because of course meritocracy is really about the best talent getting the best opportunities. So there actually always will be. There should be equal access to allow your talent to best represent the potential of your work. But then, at that point, then there will be, of course, there will be people that get more opportunity than others, and rightly so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and where I was getting to, and that's absolutely right. And it was the idea, does Behance, with the conference and with the great content that you're offering at the 99%, what are the tools that in the future potentially Behance can do, whether it's potentially education or even I imagine there could be not an infinite, but a pretty broad ecosystem of tools. Everything from managing finance, to managing sales process. The number one thing that I get asked by designers and by creative people is, how do I set up a sales process? And I happen to have a partner who's an MBA within the agency who set up our sales process. I didn't know how to do it as a creative. I learned a ton on how to do it. Scott, you happen to have an MBA, and I wanted to again go back to digging a little deeper within you. So how do you interact with creatives as somebody who has an MBA? It seems like you have a great facility, and you did your undergraduate, your thesis on information design, and it's a kind of almost like a natural relationship for you. But tell me a little bit about your MBA and how it affects your day to day.
Yeah, sure. Well, it doesn't really. I think that The benefits of the MBA were marginal at best. I think I certainly met some great people and learned a bit, but I was really focused mostly during the MBA process and founding Behance and getting it off the ground. And I think that, I would say that the benefits were like 51%, 49%. I think that net it was great, but the most of what I've learned from my colleagues and learned from just the hard way, in launching a business and getting it off the ground. We've done many iterations of the Behance network. At one point, redid the entire thing. So we've certainly learned a lot of things the hard way. Now this platform is leading us rather than us leading it. I mean, it's really, you asked about kind of where things are going and what we could do with it. I think that's a great question. We have an incredible API for the network that we're releasing to select partners to allow people to build mashups based on all the data behind the scenes. I mean, you have to realize on the Behance platform right now, there are probably 4 to 5 projects being published every single minute around the world. And all of these projects, we know what tools were used, what type of camera was used, what type of version of Illustrator, what plugins, who the client was, all this other stuff. So you can start to actually build streams of creative work based on all of this metadata, which is amazing, and again, increases the exposure that people get for their work, the surface area of exposure. The other things we can do is, it really could change the way people engage and hire and manage creative talent. And we want to make that a lot more frictionless, we call it. If you have this incredible talent and you're found by some person or company out there, there's just so much friction in that engagement. Gosh, like hiring you, finding you, paying headhunters sometimes, and marking up someone's freelance work. I mean, it's just there's so much kind of there's a lot of dirty action in that industry. There's a lot of friction, and just gets in the way of the seamlessness of it. And we want to try to eliminate that. We believe in this sort of era where creative professionals are going to be serious businesses, and they're not necessarily going to need all the middlemen to represent them.
So we talked about that earlier, that one of the statistics that I found about a year ago in the labor or the work issue of Time magazine was that by the year 2020, 40% of the U.S. labor force, that's about 190 million people, so we're 300 million total population, and I think we're about 190 or so labor force. Don't quote me on that, but 40% of that labor force will be freelance. So the opportunity there, not just for the freelancers, but also how the platform can help them, is pretty immense.
I completely agree. But in order for a freelance professional to be productive, they need to have an efficient way of getting their work out there, getting maximum exposure, getting the credibility from that exposure and from what people think of their work to get more access to more opportunity. Like, there needs to be a system in place. For too long, we've relied on our sort of circumstantial or isolated networks of people we just happen to know for every opportunity that we rely on in our lives. And it's just not enough. Like, we need something smarter than that.
So let's talk about that, because two things. One, I think that the API idea is fantastic. As an agency, one of the things that we have a FileMaker Pro database of all our resources, and we use Behance on the side. And I'm like, this is so inefficient. What if we just build our own group network on top of the Behance platform? That would be awesome. But that aside, let's transition that based on what you said. Great, I get tons of work from Behance. I'm really well represented in terms of the surface area. A lot of people know about me. And now I have to execute the projects. And I'm a creative, so maybe I got too many projects and I have all these tasks to manage, and I'm in my little studio in a loft, which is how I got, when I left Razorfish in 2000, at the end of 2000, I started in a loft, and that was me. Like, whoa, I have all these projects and I have to do them. And of course, we didn't have I have never found tools that I like, ever. Every project management online software, I read a lot of the project management and getting organized books, and none of it related to me as a creative, and the design was awful, so I really just didn't like it until I found the action method. And again, I want to make sure our viewers know this is not a commercial for Behance. This is actually truly what I do use, and I got this at TED, which is pretty awesome. On one of the cameras. And it has on the left here, it has your action list that also maps to, if we bring up Ari's screen, it actually maps to the software. So this is my own list of actions with the action method on the software platform that you offer, which is free, and also with the premium subscription. What would you advise a creative it's in a way it's kind of a question about what came about with the action method, and how would you advise somebody in terms of how to handle all the things that they have to deal with so that they don't mess it up and they can keep those clients?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, we're living in the era of reactionary workflow, right? Where there's so much stuff coming into us at any moment in time that we're simply trying to stay afloat, kind of pecking away at the collective inboxes of our lives. And that's one of the reasons why we always suffer in making progress on those long-term creative projects or ideas that we're working on. I was very interested in project management, especially in creative teams and for creative individuals. Like, how did these people operate? You know, and I was trying to find some like silver bullet approach that I could just help kind of proselytize. And of course, there wasn't one. What I found was the DIY approach was the most effective approach. That when you kind of create your own system, just like a home-cooked meal always tastes a little better, you know, you're going to be more attracted to it because you made it. And then the attraction breeds loyalty, just like in human behavior. Well, same thing in how we manage our projects. So that being said, we do need to pull from the best practices around us. And the action method products that Behance created, really we created for ourselves, because we learned early on in the research that a lot of the greatest kind of like most admired leaders in the creative world that we were meeting, they just like had this way of operating with a bias towards action. Everything they wrote down started with a verb, you know? They just like always were trying to capture the little things that kind of come up and then make sure that they were either done at the end of the day or delegated to someone. And there was just like this mantra. And so we figured, hey, I mean, note paper, like Moleskine notebooks should really have an action section. Like everything that we do should have an action section that's always separate. And we should treat action in like some sort of sacred way. I mean, we should just like kind of make sure it starts with a verb, it's kept separate, it's completed or delegated, but we should customize our system. Like anyone who comes on and says, you should use this, you know, don't believe them. You should use a combination of things that work for you.
Well, we use, for software development, a combination of Scrum or Agile software development methodologies, which really, a lot of the parallels of putting things on index cards, keeping all the actions really simple. I think I see that a parallel in the software. And talking about making ideas happen, I do want to talk a little bit about the book in a minute, but I also want to, so what you just said in terms of getting people to do things, or for us as creatives to get our ideas done, there is that type that you meet of successful entrepreneurial creatives who get stuff done because of that bias towards action. And the question is really more about, is there or will there be on Behance at any point any how do you teach people about answering their questions around, okay, how should I bill, or how should I do my sales, or how should I service my clients as a freelancer? Because we train as a designer, and I have a graphic design degree, as craftspeople to do it. So I'm building this, I'm building that. If you look at building a practice, it has all these things around it that are not doing it. Things like sales, things like project management, things like finance. All those things are ancillary, and as creatives, sometimes they stop us from moving forward and taking action simply because of the fear that we don't know. And there's a percentage of us, like myself, that say, okay, you know what, screw it. I even if I don't know it, I'm going to do it. What advice would you have for creatives in that starting point? Again, also back to Ari about that. What advice would you have? That all that knowledge depository, how to get it, how to access it?
Well, listen, I mean, we're with the 99% initiative. What we're trying to do is create a think tank all about the execution of ideas. And the origin of the 99% was, of course, was that famous Edison quote: "The genius is 1% inspiration and then the 9% perspiration." And so we're trying to actually create tons of articles, interviews, and sort of thought pieces on how people should be thinking about finances, how people should be managing their day, how people should be managing communications. We're really trying to kind of foster more discussion around some of these things because there's too much discussion about creativity, not enough about the other side of the equation. And I think that as a business, what we've always done is had the 99% lead us. So if there's something that's gaining a lot of traction and there's a huge need in the creative world, then we'll staff a team to help develop a product or service to address it. Right now, we've certainly bit off a lot more than we could probably chew with with the Behance network and all of the things that we're doing with it. But as that evolves and gets to later stages, we are going to be embarking on some new things that will hopefully address new needs.
Awesome. The 99%, I read it and I look at the blog posts, and I agree with you that some of those answers are there in terms of what to do around those topics, especially finance, productivity, etc. And I want to take a second to, Scott, I want to share with our viewers, the group school, we have workshops coming up every weekend called Weekend Web Workshops, which are specifically tailored towards either if you're a freelancer or if you're an executive at a company and you're beginning to make that transition into having to do more digital work and you want to learn the process. Many of you have asked us very explicitly to learn the user experience process that we use at the group, which I taught at Art Center, which, again, it's a pretty awesome and simple to learn once you get into it process. So the first workshops are starting on the end of this month, April 30th and May 1st, and I would love our audience to come to them. If you're here in Los Angeles, or even if you're somewhere else like Las Vegas, you can drive. And here's the thing: if you go to groupschool.net, and that's spelled 2 O's on both school and on group, you can actually find out more information. The workshop is $7.99 for the weekend. It's 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. It'll be myself and it'll be our other guest experts that you have met here on the show. But I want to do something special for our This Week in Web Design viewers. If you watch This Week in Web Design and you want to come to the workshop and you say, well, $7.99 is a little rich for me, we're doing something. We're cutting the price to $3.99 for our viewers. So if you use the code TWI Web Design, when you go to groupschool.net to register for the 2-day workshop, it'll be a great thing to get that additional discount. And keep in mind, if you want to know what we're going to cover over the 3 days, watch the 4 segments that we did a few shows back that cover the inception process, information architecture, which I know, Scott, it sounds like in your undergrad at Cornell, you really worked on. How to do user profiles and how to have the users drive the work that you're doing. How to do the beginning steps of visual design and creative briefs and branding. All those things in 2 days, hands-on with workbooks. You're going to walk out with there, if you're a freelancer, with great tools that you can use with your clients. If you're an executive, with tools that you can use to manage your teams. Or if you're just you're a student and you're still learning and you want to learn more about web design and about the digital space. It's huge. I get emails all the time from friends and other people within the industry that want to make that transition from print to digital, and this is an opportunity to begin doing that. So much so that How Magazine is having their first interactive conference in November of this year, and they asked me to do a talk about print to web, how to make that transition. So can you play that video? It's about a minute, and then we'll end the interview.
Part 1 is Inception, where we define your brand, your users, and your goals. Based on these 3 factors, we are able to determine what you need to build and the direction you need to take. Part 2 is Execution, where we architect, design, and build. We will show you how to create valuable user experiences through information architecture and visual design. Part 3 is Launch. We will teach you how to plan your launch, how to manage your backend development team, and what to do after launch to ensure adoption and monetization. These workshops will be taught in a dynamic, hands-on way with easy-to-understand workbooks, team exercises, real-world case studies, and topic experts coaching you throughout the day. We will be looking at this from a business, creative, tech, and marketing standpoint.
So Scott, as we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about the book, Making Ideas Happen. I was mentioning to you that I'm almost through the book, and I'm actually reading the iPad version, the digital version. What inspired you for the book? And out of curiosity, writing a book is a lot of work. How did you get through it, just out of professional curiosity?
It's funny. It was kind of a meta experience because I felt like I was in an MC Escher puzzle where the stairs going to the stairs, going to the stairs. Writing a book was sort of trying to make my own idea happen, and it was a book about making ideas happen. And so it was like everything that I was writing was very relevant to kind of my own struggles and the strange psychology that I confronted, and kind of pushing some of my own ideas to see the light of day. So it was a really interesting experience to actually finish this thing. I was surprised and actually like humbled by the fact that so many people took the time to just share their insights on execution. These are folks who are usually asked about, how did they come up with their photography, their insights on photography, or how do they kind of develop their style and their unique whatever approach to something. And here someone's asking them, so how do you manage a meeting? And how do you kind of make sure your day is productive? And so I got a lot of patience with a lot of these questions, and the book is really a culmination of a lot of the best practices that some of the most productive creative people and teams in the world use. And it's been a real cathartic experience for me in my own career for sure, but also for Behance. I mean, we really try to practice what we preach here.
Thank you. Thank you for writing the book for creatives. As a parting thought, and your grandfather founded Kaplan. Something that I read that was interesting, and Kaplan was a pretty, it's now a very large education company. But was there any inspiration, in your DNA from your grandfather and from your past that actually has helped you or guided you to do what you're doing today and to pursue the mission that you have?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's interesting. My grandfather was not a businessman. He was a tutor. He was tutoring kids to kind of trick the SAT. It was at a time where officially the SAT was a reasoning test, and it was illegal and again in the test rules to prepare for it, because people said you can't prepare for the SAT. It's a reasoning test, and of course he helped prove that wrong by tutoring kids and started Kaplan, which he sold as a very tiny company and was since then grown over the last, I would say, probably 20 years by a larger company to become what it is today. But I think that I really relate to his desire to kind of teach. He was all about, he felt like SAT prep for immigrant children. I mean, that's really his target market was immigrant children who would never get into some of these big colleges because they had quotas, like diversity quotas. They wouldn't allow a lot of immigrants to go to med school and stuff like that. And when the standardized test came around, it was like a neutralizing platform. It was sort of the first opportunity for someone who didn't have like the pedigree, to get into a great school and like pursue a study and something they love. Ironically, the test prep industry has now become a privileged thing, where if you don't have the money to pay for the prep, then you're at a disadvantage. And I feel like he would kind of rattle his
in a way, it's kind of that solution now became another obstacle for the people that you're servicing. Which, by the way, I think that as a metaphor, if we look at us as creatives as the future, because this is a whole other conversation that we can have about what the future looks like in terms of the role of creatives in the economy, the roles of execution. What you do to me is amazing, and I just want to say thank you for doing it for creative folks. Again, for our viewers, check out behance.net, and the upcoming is prosites.com. What's the URL?
Yeah, ProSite, just PROSITE.com is where you can sign up for the beta if you want to get into it early.
Sign up for the beta, go there, and I really want to thank you, Scott. I know you're really busy, and it took a while to schedule this with you, but I really appreciate your time and being here today.
My pleasure, guys. I love what you're doing, and it's great to be here. Thanks again for the great questions. Thank you, Scott. And I want to remind everyone that next week, we're actually going to begin part 2 of our web design series, and it's going to be Web Design 102, and we're going to start with the information architecture module, intermediate information architecture, and we're also going to have a guest information architect talking about that with myself and Ari. I really look forward to having you guys next week. Again, I want to thank Scott, I want to thank Ari for being here, and we'll see you guys next week.